Shortly, we'll talk about the cost of saving 600 jobs at Alcoa. But first tonight, we look at animal welfare laws in the wake of a case that shocked many Victorians. The RSPCA says it was powerless to remove numerous dogs from a property in Rockbank last week, despite dogs living in small cages and the suspicion pets were being killed for meat. Tonight, an animal activist tells her story of saving one dog from the property. And despite the Baillieu government's promise to clean up so-called puppy farms, 730 Victoria has obtained footage that shows what life is like for dogs inside one breeding facility. Kirsten Vaness reports, and a warning: this story contains some distressing images.
Hello, beautiful. It's okay, don't shake. It's okay. Good girl.
This dog was at the centre of a drama that's put the spotlight on Victoria's animal welfare laws. It was taken from a property at Rockbank in Melbourne's west by animal activist Deborah Tranter.
She's incredibly timid. She's frightened of everything at the moment. She's very underweight. She's got a lot of wounds on her body, but they should start to heal once we put weight on her, and there is a possibility that she's pregnant.
Deborah Tranter has been investigating the property for the past year, but it was this photo that compelled her to act immediately.
When I went there and saw her in the cage that night, it was a dog that just needed to get off that property. She had witnessed far too much, and I wasn't about to leave her there. There was no way I was leaving without that dog. So I'm just very grateful that myself and the dog made it off that property that night.
The police and the RSPCA inspected the property last week after concerns dogs were living in squalid conditions and reports they were being illegally slaughtered for meat. When the RSPCA didn't have the power to seize the dogs, Deborah Tranter stepped in and negotiated her way onto the property. She says it was a 2-hour ordeal, which became quite tense at times.
All I saw were the animals. I just needed to get on there and try and do what I can. So I didn't think of the risks or the consequences of it. Every available space has a temporary cage or pen that contains an animal, and if they're not contained, they're chained up to trees or poles or chained up to outsides of cages. They had water, but again it was just filthy. It was brown water in a bucket, and the food was a great big white bucket in each pen, and it was just filled with this rotten, mouldy, it looked like vegetables that had just turned into some soupy substance.
Was it hard to leave all the other dogs there?
Incredibly difficult. I left the property in tears. I felt, that I had failed the other animals.
The RSPCA says it was the laws which failed. All it could do was issue the owner orders to clean the place up.
We would like to have the ability to seize those dogs. The circumstances in which they're living is far from ideal and far from the standards that we would apply, that anyone in the community would apply. But we're left with the ability to negotiate with the owner, and we've been doing that.
So far, the RSPCA has negotiated the surrender of 9 dogs, which are now under quarantine at its Burwood shelter.
See, the condition is really good. You can't see the hip bones or the ribs. It's got a good amount of body fat.
There are still 2 dogs on the Rockbank property, as well as other animals, including goats, sheep and pigs. But Deborah Tranter wants to take the fight to the Victorian Government. She wants to strengthen the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act.
Cruelty actually has to occur before the legislation kicks in. So it's not the fault of the RSPCA. They have been given this legislation and it simply does nothing to prevent cruelty.
The burden of proof is very high. So are the laws adequate? They're never adequate. They're never good enough. We would always like the laws to be tougher than they are.
The owner has complied with the RSPCA's orders, but it's not the first time that property has come to the RSPCA's attention.
The property has been the subject of complaints over a number of years, and I understand they date back to something like 2004. But each of those complaints has to be dealt with on an individual basis. So our inspectors have visited the property, they've negotiated with the owner, the circumstances have been assessed, they've issued orders, they've been complied with. And this has happened, it's true, a number of times over the years.
In a statement, the Agriculture Minister, Peter Walsh, says if the RSPCA believed the dogs were at risk, it has extensive powers to seize them. Meanwhile, the police have charged the owner of the property, 41-year-old Peter Avram, with firearm offences and car theft. Authorities also found goats were being illegally slaughtered there, but there's no evidence dogs were being killed and sold for meat.
We haven't seen any evidence at all of that on the property, and as far as we know, neither have any of the other agencies who've been on the property with us.
The time for change is now.
Deborah Tranter is best known for her long campaign to abolish puppy farms. Late last year, the government passed tougher penalties and new laws aimed at shutting down illegal puppy farms. But the laws to seize animals from unregistered breeding sites haven't been used by the RSPCA yet.
Well, it's early days yet. The new legislation came into effect on the 1st of January, so we're into February. It remains to be seen how well they're going to work. We're confident, we're optimistic.
Deborah Tranter says the new laws aren't effective enough and has taken this vision of a business at Kerrang in the state's north.
Part of the flooring of the shed is wire, so the dogs are living on part wire, and all the dog waste, faeces and urine and waste, is just hosed out into the wire.
She says she's concerned some pens have more than 2 dogs, which violates the code of practice.
There's food on the floor with the faeces and urine.
Deborah Tranter claims there are more than 100 dogs inside this old shed. The owner says there are only 50. He refused 7:30 Victoria permission to take our own footage and insists the dogs are well cared for. The puppy farm is legal and has been registered with the Gannawarra Shire since 2005. The council didn't want to speak on camera, but says it inspected the site in December and is satisfied the facility complies with the code of practice. Deborah Tranter says she believes there are hundreds of facilities like this one around the state.
I go on to legal government-registered puppy farms, and there is absolutely no difference from the illegal ones. These dogs, they're denied social interaction, human interaction, and even if their sheds were clean and sparkling, they're still inflicting psychological trauma on these dogs by confining them from birth to death simply to have litters of puppies to supply the pet industry.
The Minister Peter Walsh was shown the footage and says there may be some minor breaches of the code of practice, but the breeder largely appears to comply. He says the dogs appear to be in good health with shiny coats, and the trembling dogs are most likely fearful of the lights and video camera. The RSPCA, however, says it's seriously concerned by what's in the footage and is seeking further information.
Deborah Tranter says she's gone public with the video so people can decide for themselves whether such breeding sites are adequate.
It's about public awareness. As I said, they don't know that we're factory farming our companion animals. As soon as people do find out, they are horrified.
Kirsten Vaness with that report. And next week we'll bring you the next chapter on animal welfare, a look at the politics and policies of animal shelters.
I got a bit frustrated with them refusing to take advice from outsiders and realised that the only way that I could implement these changes would be to become leadership and to take over a shelter. I believe that we're the first large shelter implementing reform and going from being high kill to no kill.
Ideally, we'd like to set the benchmark in animal welfare in Victoria.